When it comes to performing highly complicated, often life or death brain surgery, Dr Charlie Teo makes a proud boast. He is the best in the business, full stop. In fact, the celebrity neurosurgeon, also well known for his exorbitant fees, claims to be so brilliant he'll operate on patients who've been told they have no hope. Their conditions are terminal. Teo doesn't lack confidence, and a lot of people love him for it. But tonight, Kate McClymont, the Sydney Morning Herald's chief investigative reporter, looks at another side of Charlie Teo and reveals the dreadful price some of his patients have paid for believing the hype that he can perform medical miracles.
It took a near-fatal car accident for Michelle Smith to make a jaw-dropping discovery.
I felt shocked. I was under the impression that he'd removed some of it.
A decade earlier, she'd had an operation to remove a tumour. After the accident, a fresh brain scan showed none of it had been taken out. As if that wasn't horrifying enough, Michelle discovered the neurosurgeon had actually operated on the wrong side of her brain.
To find out that he didn't even touch it, I just felt violated in a way. I trusted him.
That doctor was Charlie Teo, Australia's most celebrated brain surgeon.
Well, I think I'm the best.
Describing Dr Charlie Teo as a world-renowned neurosurgeon falls short of what this bloke has achieved.
This is Jennifer, 6 weeks later, very acute, and she's likely cured.
Charlie Teo's self-proclaimed surgical superiority and heroic outcomes have been glorified by the media for years. They lionised the motorbike riding rebel who fearlessly took on the medical establishment, courageously operating when others said nothing more could be done.
I'm great at neurosurgery, so what I do is I try and push the envelope more and more.
While Dr Teo's successes have been lauded, his failures have troubled many doctors and nurses who've been left to treat patients and their families financially and emotionally crippled from his futile surgeries. Dr Teo is now facing a disciplinary hearing over 2 operations, which even he acknowledges had terrible outcomes.
I know that the 2 cases you're discussing are bad. No one can dispute that.
Tonight we hear from shattered patients who paid a heavy price after Dr Teo convinced them that in his hands, miracles can happen.
I just said to my mum, I want to see him. I want him to fix me.
Like many of Dr Teo's patients, Michelle Smith was convinced the charismatic surgeon she saw on television was the only doctor who could help cure her epileptic seizures caused by a brain tumour. In 2003, at the first appointment, 19-year-old Michelle went along with her mother, Anna.
Whilst having his door ajar and I was in the waiting room with Michelle, I heard him say to the person that was accompanying the patient, "What is your wife's or daughter's life worth?" And I thought that is a strange comment for a doctor to make.
When it was Michelle's turn, Dr Teo told them they'd come to the best and removing the tumour would be easy.
He was a doctor that had his feet up on a desk, had a yellow snake hanging out of his mouth, had a bicycle helmet right behind him so it was visible. He was arrogant, he was cool. He said, "You're not going to get better than me."
Dr Teo then told Anna the best came at a price. The operation would cost up to $50,000, and he repeated the pitch he'd used on the previous patient.
It just seemed like his selling point. What is your daughter's life worth? He makes you feel obliged to come up with the money to offer her the best that you can.
Anna struggled to come up with the money. She drained her savings and borrowed the rest from family. A month later, the operation was performed at the Prince of Wales Private Hospital in Sydney. What did Dr Teo say to you when you went for the 6-week checkup?
Everything's great, you can stop all your meds.
At the checkup, Dr Teo was pleased with his work. But as the years went by, the frequency of Michelle's seizures increased, and she couldn't hold down a job, let alone drive a car.
The seizures got worse. I lost my employment. I'd had a few jobs here and there. I had a seizure behind the wheel and hit 2 parked cars, riding off 3 cars.
In 2014, Michelle and her mother were completely floored when a new scan of Michelle's brain revealed that Charlie Teo had operated on the wrong side. The green circle in this diagram shows where the original operation was performed by Dr Teo. It's clear it's nowhere near the tumour, which is circled in red on the other side of the brain.
The previous operation was done on the wrong side of the brain, and that's why the normal brain tissue was removed. It was nowhere near the tumour.
And so none of the tumour was removed in that first operation?
No.
And how did you feel when you heard that news?
I felt like my world had moved off its axis. I felt angry more so for what Michelle had gone through. It just made me feel like we had been used. So he can put another notch of success on his belt and sing his own praises to people and ask the future patients how much their daughter's son's mother's son-in-law's life is worth.
Michelle felt Dr Teo's failed surgery, compounded by his failure to own up to his mistake, had stolen the best years of her life. In 2018, she sued Dr Teo for medical negligence and obtained a confidential settlement.
I did have a few people ask me why I would even waste my time trying to take on Charlie Teo, because he's untouchable.
And so why did you?
Because no one's untouchable.
Dr Teo denied that he'd operated on the wrong side of your head. How do you respond to that?
The scans don't lie. It's all there. Maybe he needs to look at them again.
13 years after the initial surgery, Michelle had another operation to remove the tumour. This time, a neurosurgeon at a Sydney public hospital operated at no charge, and since then Michelle has been seizure-free and feels like she's been given a new life. But Dr Teo's mistake still distresses her.
A lot of bad memories and a lot of guilt for the expense that the family went through and just the stress that I put them all under wanting this.
As you'll see, the families of many patients feel profound guilt for buying into the miracle they feel Charlie Teo sold them, only to be crushed by the repercussions from his unsuccessful surgeries.
There should be some regulation to stop this. If someone is giving false hope, then it's like a scam.
While Dr Charlie Teo has many grateful patients with good outcomes, it's his willingness to operate on tumours that other specialists have said are inoperable that has caused the greatest controversy.
I don't get referrals from doctors.
Sure.
I don't get referrals from emergency rooms or neurologists. I get them from purely word of mouth. So
Right.
easily 95% of my patients have come to me because they've heard about me or they've been rejected by someone else.
Dr Teo maintains he respects his patients' wishes, and if they want to take a gamble on surgery that other doctors have deemed too dangerous, he's happy to roll the dice. But some of the surgeries he offers are like playing Russian roulette. with the outcome arguably worse than death.
I have it, that trait of tenacity, but sometimes I question my own motivation and my own reasoning as to why I should operate on something that's so inoperable as a brainstem glioma. They all die anyway, brainstem gliomas, patients with brainstem gliomas. So I've often rationalised to myself that, well, they're going to die anyway. Why don't we give it a shot?
Charlie Teo's questionable surgeries on inoperable tumours have led to an ongoing investigation by medical authorities. Last year, the New South Wales Medical Council became so concerned about the risk he posed to the public that they placed restrictions on his ability to perform brainstem operations. Even worse for Dr Teo, Prince of Wales Private Hospital, where he's worked for years, no longer lets him operate.
Dr. Charlie told us that we'll get normal and healthy Mykolas back. That's why we agreed with this risk.
One of those angry about Dr Teo's brainstem surgeries is Prasanta Barman, an engineer from Assam in India. In 2018, his much-loved only child, 4-year-old Mykolaj, was diagnosed with a rare brainstem tumour called a diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. DIPGs, as they're known, are incurable and inoperable.
The doctors in India were telling that it's not possible, it's not operable, there is no cure for DIPG.
It is the only tumor in pediatrics where from the day you're diagnosed, you're already considered palliative.
Mark Kieran is a leading American paediatric oncologist who's trying to find a cure for DIPGs, the most lethal of childhood cancers, where the average life expectancy is 6 to 18 months.
It's not just a question of if you're going to die, it's really when you're going to die.
So it's the worst of the worst.
It is the worst of the worst. There's no way to cut out the tumor cell without cutting out those normal cells.
A DIPG is diagnosed by an MRI combined with the child's symptoms, such as headaches, blurred vision, and problems with balance. It grows in a crucial part of the brainstem known as the pons, that links the brain to the spinal cord.
In a normal MRI, this area right here, called the pons, is the normal structure that controls things like breathing, heart rate, and the ability to be awake and alert. You can see in a child with DIPG how this area is now completely swollen and unfortunately completely surrounds all of the normal cells, meaning that if you tried to remove this area, you'd be cutting out all of the normal cells and their critical function as well.
As a neurosurgeon, I don't have a role in this cancer. It's illogical, to go in there and think that in the traditional sense of surgery, I'm going to take out this tumor.
Like Mark Kieran, Professor Mark Swedane knows just how deadly DIPGs are. He's one of America's preeminent paediatric neurosurgeons and is focused on finding a cure through drug trials. Professor Swedane says it's well understood in international medical circles that surgical removal, known as resection, would be catastrophic given the location of the tumour in the brainstem. What harm could resection possibly do to a child?
Death, permanent morbidity, paralysis, inability to preserve vital functions, breathing, respirations, blood pressure, heart rate.
But as far as you're aware, there is no clinical or research data anywhere in the world that shows a benefit from resecting these kind of tumours?
Absolutely not. It doesn't exist.
2 neurosurgeons in India told Prasanta Barman his son had a deadly DIPG. But friends told him about the famous Australian neurosurgeon, and in desperation, Prasanta emailed the MRI scans to Dr Teo. Emails from Dr Teo's office contradicted the previous diagnosis. Unbelievably, Prasanta was told the tumour could be removed and Mykolaj cured. Dr Teo wanted to operate as soon as possible.
Dr Teo has reviewed the scans and suggested urgent surgery. He said there is a very high likelihood of cure.
I sent about 10-15 questions, and some of these questions were like, what is the possibility of cure? He said once we can remove the entire tumor, he can live a healthy life.
We showed Mikolaj's scans to multiple neurosurgeons who immediately identified the tumour as a DIPG. When told that an unnamed surgeon had offered a resection with the hope of a cure, they were horrified. Given the high stakes of operating in the brainstem, if there was the slightest doubt about Mikolaj's tumour, a biopsy prior to the surgery would provide a definitive result.
If one is troubled by something that's out of step, is you do a biopsy. Do a biopsy, let's get those results, and then make a determination about what to do. And that's not a difficult endeavor. It's a half-an-hour operation. The children usually go home the next day, and you pick up the pieces later and make a decision with information.
We gave him all the reports, and we asked him if he needs any investigation or any other test which I need to do before I go for surgery. He said no further investigation, nothing is required.
When Prasanta asked about the risks of the operation, he was told there were many and the tumour was in an extremely critical part of the brain. But it was emphasised to him that surgery was the only hope.
It's important to note, though, that if Mikolaj does not have the operation, then he will likely die from this tumour.
Persuaded by Dr Teo there was a good chance the surgery would cure his son, Prasanta opted to have the operation for $80,000 in Singapore instead of $150,000 at Prince of Wales Private Hospital in Sydney. He used up his retirement savings, borrowed money, and friends helped fundraise for the operation. Before the operation, Charlie Teo was paid $40,000 and another $40,000 went to the hospital in Singapore. The night before the surgery, in this video, Mikolaj was chatty and his parents were optimistic.
He was playing with his toys, and at that time we told him that there will be a big fight tomorrow. There's something inside your brain, something inside your head, so that bad things will be taken out, and after that you will be okay again. And he was saying, yes, I will fight with it. And saying this, he was punching those balloons and said, I will fight like this.
Dr Teo only met the little boy for the first time as he was being wheeled into the operating theatre. It was then that he gave the parents troubling news.
He said that tumor is in a very remote area, and it was diffused, and so we may not be able to remove 100% of the tumor.
Prasanta and his wife were worried, but it was too late to back out. The operation went ahead and it lasted 10 hours. Charlie Teo spent just 10 minutes telling Prasanta that he'd removed 85% of the tumour and it looked benign. However, within days, the biopsy results confirmed what had been obvious to the other surgeons. It wasn't benign, it was a DIPG. As could have been predicted, Dr Teo's futile and costly operation catastrophically damaged the once happy, playful boy who would never walk, talk, or eat on his own again.
He was bedridden. He cannot move his leg or hands. Doctor said it's like a vegetative state.
The family couldn't afford the mounting medical costs at the private hospital in Singapore. Because Mikolaj was so ill and unable to breathe on his own, Prasanta spent $40,000 for an air ambulance to fly him back to India. There he languished in intensive care for months. In total, the family spent nearly $250,000. The rest of Mikolaj's short life was spent in a room staring at a ceiling. His only means of communication was blinking his eyes. Do you regret your decision to have the operation?
Yes, I regret. He spoiled our last 13 months. After the operation, he was in a bed. He cannot play. He can just blink his eyes and say yes or no to us. To confess, yes, he will blink his eyes. And to say no, he will raise his.
10 months after the catastrophic operation, the inevitable happened. The tumour returned and Mikolaj died. When told of his death, Dr. Teo sent Prasanta an email.
I'm so sorry, but you have given him every possible chance to live longer, and I would like to reassure you that he has had the most aggressive treatment possible.
Dr. Teo's misjudgment that the tumour was low-grade and operable had devastating consequences for little Mikolaj. In a statement to 60 Minutes, Dr. Teo was adamant he would never operate on a DIPG because it would be of no benefit to a patient. Prasanta is still racked by guilt for what he put his son through. Today he deals with his ongoing anguish by supporting the most vulnerable in his community, the local school for the blind.
There should be some regulation to stop this. If someone is giving false hope, then it's like a scam. There was no hope. For DIPG, there is no hope. So why he gave the false hope in the first place?
A year after Mikolaj's death, another family was facing the dire diagnosis of a DIPG. Their story of hope is hauntingly similar.
It definitely come across as, I'm famous and I can help you. Absolutely, that came across. And it gave us hope.
2 years ago, 7-year-old Bella Howard was diagnosed with the same condition as Mikolaj Barman, an inoperable and incurable brain tumour known as a DIPG.
As a parent, you don't accept death, not when it comes to your children. It's to do anything to save them.
In desperation, Bella's father, Gene Howard, made the journey from the sleepy New South Wales coastal town of Shoal Bay to Sydney in search of a miracle. He thought he found it in Charlie Teo, and at first, the news was encouraging. Even though Dr. Teo's notes indicated he agreed that this is likely to be a DIPG, he suggested there was a tiny chance it wasn't an aggressive tumour after all. Bella's grandmother Maritza remembers this.
So he said we have a 1% chance there that scan might be a little bit off.
What was he offering to do for you?
He could do some cutting or resection work to try and remove some of the tumour. The result of that, if it goes well, the possibility of extended life, she could live longer.
He actually said that?
He said that, yeah. At this point, we were all in tears because there was no hope. Then we got this possibility of hope. There's a doctor out there offering something.
If Dr. Teo had any doubts about the kind of tumour, he could have waited for conclusive biopsy results. Instead, he wanted to operate the very next day. The Howards leapt at the chance to save Bella. However, there was a catch. The surgery would cost $100,000, and $50,000 had to be in Dr. Teo's bank account that night.
Yeah, it was a shock. We were trying to figure out, how to get it ourselves. But even to get a loan, it takes weeks. Even friends that have lots of equity, for them to get a loan, it still takes weeks. Felt like we were nearly not going to have it happen, and my heart was just dropping every time I thought that. I wasn't ever stopping until we got that money.
Well, I was shocked at the amount.
Mark Ramsland is a friend of the Howard family and their solicitor. A cancer survivor himself, he was troubled at the haste for the surgery and the extraordinary amount of money that had to be in Dr. Teo's account that night.
My concern initially was the rush. Why did they have to have an operation in effect overnight? Why did they have to raise money overnight? I was just a little perplexed at how an operation that could save someone's life needed to be contingent on a payment of money the very next day.
Jean's boss loaned him the money, clearing the way for the operation to go ahead the next morning. Immediately after the surgery, Jean was ecstatic when Dr. Teo said he'd removed 95% of the tumour, which, in his opinion, was low-grade and slow-growing.
Definitely when you take 95% of anything out of anything, you're going to be pretty positive about something's future. We're really positive. This could be good for Bella, and it could extend her life by ages.
Within days of the operation, Dr. Teo received the biopsy results. Bella's tumour had the genetic marker for an aggressive, fast-growing DIPG. But even then, Dr. Teo questioned the validity of the pathology results and continued to give the parents hope that his resection had been their best option. However, distinguished paediatric oncologist Mark Kieran says resection of a DIPG is futile and harmful.
If you asked me, is DIPG ever a surgically curable tumor? The answer is no. It can only result in neurologic devastation and eventual death, either from the surgery or your tumor.
Even if you took out 99.9% of the tumour surgically, which you say is nigh on impossible anyway, it's going to come back. Is that right?
That's correct.
Neurosurgeon Mark Swardane has never seen or heard of anyone trying to surgically remove a DIPG because of the harm it will do to the child.
So I honestly have not been witness to someone trying to resect a classic DIPG. So I can't tell you because I've never seen it. I would predict it's going to be a devastating endeavor.
When she first came out, she was paralysed, left arm, left leg, and her, I think it was her left face. She couldn't move them at all.
Hey, Bubba, can I get a thumbs up? Oh, that was quick. Good girl.
Bella was different. Bella had pronounced palsy. She couldn't really walk. She couldn't speak. I couldn't understand her.
Good girl, Bella. Look at this. Oh, my God.
The family struggled to repay the money for the operation, and like dozens of Dr. Teo's patients, resorted to crowdfunding for help. Bella needed constant care and rehabilitation.
She couldn't stand on her legs and that, so physio had to come and try and make her walk and all that. The first few days was hard. After time, she got there.
7-year-old Bella Howard has been in and out of surgery, battling an aggressive brain tumour.
While the family remained optimistic, the cancer was taking its inevitable fatal course. On the long drive home to Shoal Bay after Bella's 12-week scan, Jean and Sarah received the shattering news. Dr. Teo told Jean to pull over and get out of the car.
That's when he told me, mate, this is really bad. The scan's come back, it's grown probably 2 or 3 times as big as what it originally was.
When Jean hopped back in the car, I said, is it good or bad? He just shook his head, and I just started crying straight away, all the way home.
Good girl.
Bella deteriorated quickly and required 24-hour care.
Good girl.
Doctors at John Hunter Hospital in Newcastle, north of Sydney, had originally given her 6 to 18 months. In January 2021, 8 months after diagnosis, Bella died surrounded by her devastated family.
Yeah, it was hard, just holding her in my arms, slowly watching the tumour shut everything down.
I said, Bella, I know you can hear me. You be good up there. And I said, there's a good world after here. It's probably even better than here. And yeah, we'll see you one day. You stay strong.
Words just can't describe how hard it was to watch my beautiful Bella die.
A DIPG was recorded as Bella's official cause of death. However, in a statement to 60 Minutes, Dr Teo said he has never operated on a pure DIPG and has never recommended surgery on such a tumour. It is incurable and truly inoperable, he said. A few months after Bella died, medical authorities placed restrictions on Dr Teo's ability to perform brainstem tumour operations.
It does make you think back and go, well, you know, how safe was it, or, you know, what was really going on? I mean, it was just such a pressuring time to make decisions like that with no help from the public system and no help from anyone really, except for the family.
While the Howards still appreciate the hope Dr Teo gave them, the family lawyer Mark Ramsland, having read up on DIPGs, now questions whether there was indeed any point in having the surgery. He worries about the rush to operate and whether Charlie Teo gave the Howards all the information they needed to provide proper informed consent.
If the operation did not have any hope, then what was the point? Why? Why did Bella have to spend the last few months of her life not being able to walk or speak or function properly? Those are some of the questions that I had and Jean had. Why did the system let that family down?
And how do you think the system let the family down?
We have a great Medicare system. I had an operation that cost me nothing. We have a great system, but there are those that operate outside the system. They don't seem to have checks and balances. That worries me.
In the private system, Dr Teo can operate as a one-man band whose decisions go unchallenged.
These first two scans.
It's a different story in the public health system, where there is not only greater scrutiny, but a team of specialists diagnose and chart the best course of treatment for patients with brain tumours. Dr Teo has repeatedly criticised these teams.
I'm not the most politically correct person, I'm not very diplomatic, but I try to sit in on those MDTs, the multidisciplinary team meetings, where everyone sits around and looks for consensus, but you know, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because you've got people in there who are incredibly ultra-conservative, who will never take a risk.
This then progresses quite drastically.
Throughout the world, these multidisciplinary teams that Dr Teo derides are considered best practice for treating brain tumours. Neurosurgeon Mark Swedane says treating brain tumours is not the preserve of neurosurgeons alone.
Making decisions in cancer and pediatric oncology in isolation is a really dangerous endeavor. You need checks, you need balances, you need consensus building, you need good ideas. And the truth of the matter is, very rarely do any of these work by themselves. So it's a complex puzzle where everything contributes toward the same common goal or desired goal, and that's cure.
I work with a team of experts. This idea that someone is the smartest person in the room, someone is the best in the country, I just don't think that's true. 31, she's a vet, just finished her vet.
Professor Kate Drummond is the head of neurosurgery at Royal Melbourne Hospital. She's running their weekly multidisciplinary team meeting where neurosurgeons are joined by oncologists, neurologists, radiologists and other specialists to work out the best course of treatment, in this case for a 31-year-old veterinary surgeon.
She presented many years ago with this small lesion, which I took out awake.
Radiation, and we had to.
What the experts know is that surgery isn't always the best option, depending on the type of tumour and the patient.
We'll watch her probably in the next couple of years or 5 years, but I wouldn't go now.
What does inoperable mean?
There are parts of the brain where we really feel that in the majority of cases, surgery will lead to intolerable complications, very poor outcome, and in fact risk to life or consciousness. And those areas, I guess, are truly the ones we consider inoperable.
All those diseases that were once called inoperable, I'm going to go through every one of them individually and see if they really are inoperable in my hands.
The private system has allowed Dr Teo the opportunity to play God. He claims he would be more than happy to operate in the public system, but he says colleagues, envious of his superior skills, have shut him out.
If the public only knew the number of children that are sent to their death that I could save, it's every day, I promise you. I can take out all these tumours and they will just refuse. I'd rather see the children die than come to me. Their egos are too big or they're too fragile or whatever, but they just won't accept that I'm doing something different.
The truth is somewhat different. In 2017, Dr Teo let lapse his accreditation, allowing him to operate at the Prince of Wales Public Hospital. Even before that, his colleagues suggest part of his reluctance to operate in the public system was because he would not be able to charge his extraordinary fees. Also, the validity of his riskier surgeries would have been challenged.
They bring up this concept of evidence-based medicine, but that's ridiculous too, because if you are waiting to read the literature before you do an operation, of course you're never going to do a new operation, because there's no literature to support it. The trouble is we're not taught to offer medical treatments based on chance or taking a chance.
However, for some of his patients who do take that chance, they realise too late that they're condemned to a life arguably worse than death.
Doctors take an oath, do no harm. This has done more harm than good. Emotionally, physically and mentally, the strain you put on families when you do operations like this is a lot more than if you would lose someone.
Across Australia, dozens in the medical profession have told 60 Minutes how the public system has been left to care for damaged patients and their families who are too broken to complain about the steep price they paid for the hope Dr Charlie Teo was selling.
You've got to tell the truth. You can't just cover things up. You cannot be all roses and I'm fantastic and I will do this and I will be able to achieve this. You've got to tell the consequences. And to me, my thing is, yes, you did the operation, yes, you took the tumour, but what quality of life did you leave him with?
Kathy and Joe Leslie enjoyed years of happy travels as Joe's engineering job took them around the world.
He was absolutely the love of my life.
Joe had previously had treatment for a slow-growing brain tumour, but in 2018, Queensland doctors told him that further treatment was too risky and was likely to leave him blind.
They're saying if they did operate, they would make a vegetable of him. They felt that it was that the care that they would give him, the quality of life that he would be left with if he survived the operation would be limited.
Joe was given 2 years to live, so the family, having heard of Charlie Teo's surgical skills, wanted a second opinion. At the consultation, Dr. Teo assured Joe he could remove the tumour for $35,000 and dismissed concerns raised by the other doctors that it would leave him blind.
Don't worry about that. This is me. I can do way better than what they can do. One of the things that stood out to me was that he basically said that the other surgeons were jealous of him because of what he could achieve. And they poo-hooed him, and that he was a lot better than what they were saying and he could achieve great things.
So what was the one thing that your husband Joe was worried about? What was the deal breaker?
He didn't want to go blind. He would rather have passed away than go blind. That was his big thing.
And was this deal breaker discussed with Charlie Teo?
Very much so. He virtually pushed that aside and said, look, that's not going to happen. You're going to be able to keep your sight in both eyes.
Joe's surgery at Prince of Wales Private Hospital was due to begin at 3 p.m, but due to complications with the previous operation, Dr. Teo didn't start until 9 p.m. and didn't finish until 5 the next morning.
Because Teo had to go to Singapore the next day, it had to be done then, rather than be put off because it's too late at night. And that concerned me, very much concerned me. What was so important that he had to get on that plane and go rather than giving quality of care.
What Kathy Leslie didn't know was that Dr. Teo was jetting off to Singapore to operate unsuccessfully on 4-year-old Michelage Barman. Despite Dr. Teo assuring Joe he'd be back at work in no time, Joe had serious post-operative complications and was in and out of hospital in Sydney for 6 weeks before returning home to Queensland. But worst of all, he was now blind. Has Joe ever said to you that he wished he hadn't had the operation?
He said if he knew what he knows, that basically he would not have had the operation. He would not. And he is very resentful of the fact that Teo just couldn't care less that he left him.
Joe Leslie lost more than his eyesight. He's brain damaged, confused, and requires 24-hour care. He didn't have the capacity to provide consent to be interviewed.
The life he lives now, Joe would be horrified. The old Joe, the Joe that we knew, would be horrified at what his life has come to. He's not a vegetable, but his capacity of life is not what it was, and is very diminished, extremely diminished.
The thing I don't like and the thing I really resent is when they tell their patients, oh, don't go and see Charlie Teo. Oh, no, he's going to give you false hope. And they've said to my patients things like, well, you might have heard about the good cases, but, I can tell you about the bad cases. Now, that's what I resent, because all patients have the right to choose themselves who they want to see and what risks they're willing to take.
Rebecca Anderson counts herself lucky. In 2009, she was fired by Dr. Teo as his patient when she tried to discuss what risks she was willing to take to remove her benign tumour. As a nurse at the same hospital, Rebecca was aware of Dr. Teo's aggressive operating style, pushing the boundaries when it came to removing tumours.
I said to him, Dr. Teo, when you're operating on me, I want you to remember who I am. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm a nurse. And I have children, so I just please want you to, make sure you don't be too aggressive where I'm going to end up not being able to be any of those three things.
And what was his response?
He said, well, that's not my style, but I'll try.
As the date for her operation drew near, Rebecca wanted reassurance that Dr. Teo understood her fears about being too gung-ho in surgery. He didn't return any of her calls to his office. When she ran into him in the hallway at the hospital, his response shocked her.
He basically said, I never call anyone back and I never speak to anyone again before their surgery. If you didn't glean everything that you wanted from our initial consultation, too bad.
Her sister Alana was waiting to take her home and was appalled by what Rebecca said of her encounter with Dr. Teo.
I interview my patients. My patients don't interview me.
He just looked at me and he said, you know this? I've just got really bad karma from you. So you know what? I'm cancelling your surgery. And as Dr. Teo strode down the corridor, yelling over his shoulder, cancelled, surgery's cancelled. And that was the last I heard from him. I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. I was in floods of tears.
Total shock. Could not believe what had just happened, because we've been told over and over again how amazing he is, because no one's ever said anything different.
Rebecca went on to have successful surgery at a public hospital, and what's more, it cost her nothing. Dr. Teo grudgingly apologised after a complaint was made to Prince of Wales Private Hospital. But Rebecca isn't the only one to feel Dr. Teo's wrath. When a professor dared question why so many patients were resorting to crowdfunding to pay for Dr. Teo's surgeries, he was bewildered by the response he received.
I had to literally switch off social media because there was an endless stream of abusive messages.
For years, Charlie Teo has been happy with the positive side of celebrity. But he has his lawyer on speed dial to shut down the slightest of criticisms.
I've virtually got a full-time lawyer on retainer to fight my battles for me, write the letters, do all that sort of stuff. It's just every week the fraternity have been trying to destroy this, finding some other way of trying to destroy me. It's terrible. Yeah.
Dr. Teo has long said his colleagues have it in for him.
All about giving people false hope and charging too much money, and it's all bullshit, petty stuff, and so I don't know what it is. But you're right, I'm hated by my colleagues. There are very few doctors who actually respect me or like me. Most of them hate me with a vengeance.
Far from being jealous, other doctors are deeply concerned, not just about the false hope and excessive fees, but the dire outcomes for many of his patients. They're reluctant to speak publicly about Dr. Teo after seeing what happened to Professor Henry Wu. In 2019, he tweeted about the 113 crowdfunding campaigns to cover the thousands of dollars for Charlie Teo's surgeries.
I thought that these were eye-watering amounts of money to have to raise to treat cancer. Nobody should have to resort to literally begging for strangers to support the cost of their medical care. This is Australia.
While the professor of urology thought he was raising a worthwhile public health issue, Charlie Teo took it personally, claiming Professor Wu was out to destroy him.
I don't know his intention for bringing the issue up, but I think his intention was negative. It was vilification of Charlie Teo.
A later tweet by Professor Wu, questioning the $100,000 crowdfunding drive for Bella Howard's surgery, saw Dr. Teo call in the lawyers.
I did pay a price for continuing this discussion in that Dr. Teo did commence legal proceedings against me just over that tweet, and it also really highlighted exactly why other doctors are hesitant to make comment about another practice that might be perceived as critical.
The world needs to know that it's just a very unfair
While
place.
Dr Teo ultimately withdrew his defamation action against Professor Wu, clearly the mention of how much the brain surgeon charges struck a nerve. In an attempt at damage control, Dr Teo tried to play down the amount of money he personally receives for surgeries.
$120,000 bill that Henry Wu's talking about, $80,000 goes to the private hospital, $40,000 then gets dispersed amongst not only the surgeon but also the assistant, the anaesthetist, the pathologist, the radiologist, the radiographer. So it's not that great an amount to each individual person.
So what sort of percentage...
So when you get your facts straight, let's talk about the fact...
Can I just quickly ask you on that,
So,
though?
let's talk about the fact that,
what sort of percentage of the pie would you get in that instance?
Well, for that particular case, of $120,000 that he talked about, I got $8,000.
Dr Teo's patients are told they need to pay $50,000 up front. Jean Howard's bill shows that of that amount, Dr Teo pocketed $35,000, and on top of that, he charged a $1,000 administration fee. Uninsured patients are also told their private hospital stay will be charged separately.
I would have done anything for my daughter to get what she needs. And, if she was alive now and needed it now, I'd still sell my kidney, mate. That's not negotiable.
No, it's not just a blessing.
Kathy Leslie and other families told 60 Minutes of their surprise that Dr Teo insists that only cash is accepted at the initial consultation.
It was cash only for his first appointment, which was $800, and it had to be cash. Otherwise, cash only. You had to provide cash.
But it's not just the money that Dr Teo charges that caused concerns. While Professor Wu is sympathetic to the plight of desperate families, he raised the question that has troubled many in the profession. Where was Dr Teo's evidence that his outcomes were better than anyone else's?
All operations that are considered to be appropriate for a particular condition can be and should be able to be offered in the public hospital system. If a cancer specialist has a contrary view to what is acceptable treatment, then it's incumbent upon them to carry out clinical trials and produce the data to support the work that they're doing. And if they do produce that data, then even the staunchest critic is going to be won over.
While restrictions on his medical licence and an ongoing investigation have curtailed Dr Teo's business in Australia, he is currently plying his trade at hospitals in Spain. But for the families who've witnessed the catastrophic outcome of Charlie Teo's surgeries, the guilt and anguish will be with them for the rest of their lives.
Yes, you did the operation. Yes, you took the tumour, but what quality of life did you leave him with? Now, would Teo like to live the life that Joe's living? Is this the quality of life you want for yourself? Why do you do it to other people then?
I don't want any parents to suffer this horrible thing. If, God forbid, if someone's children get this type of disease, even if some doctors or someone says there is a cure, don't listen.
Hello, I'm Sarah Abo. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our Extra Minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.